There are orchards still bearing fruit that were planted before your great-grandmother was born. No one tends them, no one fertilizes them, no one irrigates them or sprays them or prunes them according to a seasonal schedule prepared by an agronomist. They exist in old valleys in Morocco and on terraced hillsides in Kerala and along the forgotten field margins of medieval England, and they produce, quietly, consistently, without instruction, the way living systems do when they have been left to become what they were always capable of becoming. This is not a coincidence. It is a design. For most of human agricultural history, the dominant food-producing system was not a field. It was not a row. It was not a monoculture plowed flat and planted in a single season. It was a layered living structure. Trees, shrubs, climbing plants, ground covers, root crops, occupying the same ground simultaneously, each one supporting the others in ways that required no external input once the system had settled into itself. It fed families across generations. It enriched the soil it grew in rather than extracting from it. And once established, it required almost no labor to maintain. It was called different things in different centuries: forest garden, food forest, multi-strata agroforestry. The names changed, the logic did not. Modern agriculture does not teach it. That too is not a coincidence. A system that produces food for 100 years without being purchased, replanted, reseeded, or resupplied cannot be sold. What cannot be sold cannot be prioritized, and what cannot be prioritized over time begins to appear as though it never existed. This is ancient food files, a place for knowledge that became inconvenient. The agricultural systems, the plants, the practices that functioned too well without permission to survive the age of dependency. If recovering what has been quietly erased matters to you, consider subscribing, not for expansion, but because these records exist only as long as someone keeps them. The oldest known food forests are found in what is now Kerala, on the southwestern coast of India. They are called home gardens. In the Malayalam tradition, they are sometimes referred to as Tharavadu Totam, the ancestral garden. Some of the trees inside them have been producing for more than 4 centuries. They were never planted all at once. They were built gradually. One generation plants a tree. The next adds another layer. Children inherit not a field, but a living structure. The design mirrors the architecture of the tropical forest. At the top stands a canopy of tall trees, jackfruit, coconut, mango. Below them grows a mid-story of banana, papaya, and coffee. Under that come shrubs and medicinal plants. Closer to the soil, herbs and leafy crops. Across the ground, root crops and spreading covers. And moving through all of it, climbing plants, pepper vines, yam, betel, rising toward the light along whatever structure offers support. 7 layers, sometimes more. Each layer performs multiple functions: shade, moisture retention, food production, soil protection, fertility. What appears chaotic to modern eyes is actually structured balance, a living architecture refined over centuries of observation. Kerala was not unique. Across the world, variations of the same logic emerged. In Morocco's pre-Saharan valleys, oasis agroforestry systems known as palmoral formed layered landscapes beneath towering date palms. The palms created shade. Beneath them grew pomegranate, fig, and olive. Below that layer, wheat and vegetables grew in cool soil protected from desert winds. In some oases, this structure has been maintained for over 1,000 years. The Amazigh people who maintained these systems did not describe them as agricultural innovations. To them, it was simply how land worked when it was treated properly. Evidence of similar systems appears in medieval England. County surveys and monastic estate records describe orchards filled not only with apples and pears, but with hazel, elder, and wild garlic growing beneath them. Hedgerows were not boundaries, they were productive ecosystems, a dense web of edible and medicinal plants woven through farmland. The forest garden did not operate like a farm, it functioned like an ecosystem, because it was one. In a monoculture field, soil is exposed, rain strikes bare ground, topsoil washes away. Microbial life collapses without living roots. Fertility must be imported. The forest garden does the opposite. Tree canopies soften rainfall. Roots of different species occupy different depths. Leaf litter becomes mulch. Mulch becomes organic matter. Organic matter becomes soil. Nitrogen-fixing trees convert atmospheric nitrogen into plant nutrients. The system generates its own fertility. Given time, it grows more productive, not less. History provides a quiet warning about what happens when complexity disappears. In 1845, potato blight spread across Ireland. By then, the agricultural landscape had already been reshaped by centuries of consolidation. The Enclosure Acts had dismantled older systems of mixed gardens and diverse crops. Families became dependent on a single harvest. When that harvest failed, nothing remained to fall back on. But in regions where small, complex plots survived, orchards, hedgerows, layered gardens, collapse was not as absolute. Complexity was survival. Monoculture made catastrophe total. A century later, during the siege of Leningrad beginning in 1941, survival again depended on small garden plots maintained by ordinary citizens. These were not forest gardens in the classical sense, but they were diverse, layered systems with multiple crops growing simultaneously. When supply chains failed, those small plots continued producing. After the Second World War, global agriculture moved in a different direction: consolidation, mechanization, scale. The Green Revolution dramatically increased yields of wheat, rice, and maize through new varieties, fertilizers, and irrigation. In those terms, the forest garden was inefficient. Its yields were spread across many species. Its harvests were staggered across seasons. It could not be harvested by machines. Its seeds could not be patented, and its trees required patience. So it disappeared from agricultural education, not by force, but by omission. In the early 1960s, a British horticulturalist named Robert Hart began rebuilding something similar on a small plot in Shropshire. He studied traditional orchards. He read about Kerala's home gardens, and he began experimenting, without funding, without institutional support. For decades, he quietly cultivated a layered forest garden. By the 1990s, researchers began paying attention. A small plot managed by a single elderly man was producing diverse harvests year after year. Soil tests revealed something unusual. Organic matter was increasing, microbial life was expanding, the soil was becoming richer over time. By the early 2000s, agroforestry researchers across Europe, Africa, and Asia confirmed similar findings. Layered perennial systems often produced greater total food yield per unit of land when measured across decades. They required less water, they built soil, and they were dramatically more resilient to climate variability. The science confirmed what centuries of farmers had already observed. The forest garden had never stopped working. The real disappearance was memory. When food systems become associated with poverty, they are often abandoned not because they fail, but because people wish to leave the conditions surrounding them behind. Children grow up eating differently. Different becomes modern. Modern becomes normal, and within 2 generations, the knowledge of how the old systems functioned disappears. But the conditions that made them inconvenient are changing again. Topsoil is disappearing. Climate instability is rising. Pests and diseases move across landscapes faster than monocultures can adapt, and researchers are once again looking toward systems that regulate themselves, systems built from diversity, systems built for time. The knowledge was never truly lost. It remained in Kerala's home gardens, in Moroccan oasis groves, in the experimental forest gardens of quiet researchers, and beneath abandoned orchard land, where underground fungal networks still wait for roots to return. The forest garden does not need rediscovery, it needs remembering. This is Ancient Food Files, not a place for nostalgia, but a place for records, because the future may depend on knowledge that was almost allowed to disappear.